Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I just played Clank Catacombs, and I have to admit, I wish we'd played this a little sooner. We've had this copy for a little bit.
I've played it a couple times.
You have played it a couple times. Ryan was kind enough to teach it to me today. And of course, I've played Clank. And they think, I want to say they announced this last Gen Con or sort of revealed it. They had demo copies there. They weren't selling it. They were selling it at PAX.
They were, yep.
Unplugged. I don't know that it's quite available yet. I did a quick glance before we played to see what stores it was available at, and I didn't see it. So anyway.
It should be soon, if not.
If it's not out at your local friendly game store, it should be soon. We had a chance to just play it, and I'm going to say it right off the bat.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever need to play normal Clank again.
Well, I mean, normal Clank is a great game.
Yes.
And when Clank came out, it did a lot of brand new things with the deck building and using the map to move your meeple around.
Sure.
And sure, it's gotten a little bit old for people. And then they did come out with Clank in Space, which kind of reinvigorated it. And Clank,
a little bit.
Clank Legacy.
Clank Legacy for sure.
Which
Clank
invigorated it.
Clank in Space came out, and I remember it having some things that it did that I really liked. However, I preferred the theme of Clank. Yeah. Not that I don't like a space theme, but I preferred the theme of Clank. But even that didn't, and all the expansions didn't really keep me coming back.
Sure. This one will?
It might. I mean, I definitely put Clank back on my radar to the point where I'm going to take this and I'm going to play it with all of the usual suspects in my life to sort of reintroduce it to them. I was just telling my son right after we played what this did differently. And that's what we're going to tell you right now. The biggest thing this does differently, of course, is there's no main board. There's a stack of tiles. You start on this little double tile. And then as you move and explore, when you go off of a tile, you're going to draw the top tile and add it to where you're going off. And the player gets to decide how they want to orient this thing. And it adds a feeling of exploration and discovery that just simply did not exist in the other Clank at all. And I mean, not just a little bit, it takes it to a completely new level. And I think it, like, honestly, that's why I said as soon as we started flipping tiles, before we'd even finished the game, I was like, I don't think I'll ever play Clank again. And not that I was playing Clank a lot.
I mean, I was playing Clank a lot. But I still loved the original Clank. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing in Clank, there's nothing even in gaming that feels as good as flipping that tile. And then being able to orient it. And then you're seeing this map come alive. And you're seeing all those pathways in Clank. And there are a lot of different pathways. If you remember from Clank, there's pathways with monsters, with footsteps that take more movement. There's locks now where you have to use lock picks to open up a lock and things like that. And when you're placing these tiles, you're making these paths. And they get zany. They loop around and they go through different places. And you're trying to get maybe to a spot you want to get to. Maybe you want to get to a tile that when that tile was placed, there was nothing that led to it. And you have to build a path to it. But the tile that you're placing maybe doesn't get you there, and you have to kind of solve that puzzle of like, oh, but if I arrange it this way, I can double back around, I can come around this way. Like, it's a very cool and unique feeling.
Yeah, the adding of the tiles, that's the biggest difference. Now, the other difference kind of goes hand in hand with that, in my opinion, and that is all of the design space that this adds to the game.
Yeah.
You might look at those things in and of themselves the same, but they've done a lot with this in terms of adding some elements to the gameplay, sort of these waypoint things that come out on some of the tiles.
The way shrines and the portals.
You're able to move through portals to different tiles. And of course, it all depends on whether, all those tiles come out. We got through the game and there's still this looks like maybe a little less than half the stack.
And there's some tiles you don't even use when you're building up this stack. Right. There's some that aren't even in the game. So you're going to get a completely variable looking map every single time you play, which means the artifacts are going to be in different places, which to me, that's the biggest criticism of Clank, is it kind of got to a point where people that knew could be like, okay, I'm beelining for this one, I'm grabbing it and I'm getting out. And I know exactly the path I'm going to take every single time I play Clank. You're never going to do that in Catacombs because you can't. You don't even know if the tile you're flipping is going to have an artifact on it when you're flipping that tile.
Right. Just the unknown aspect of flipping these tiles, it works so well with the theme because you want to imagine you're on an adventure. And in the original one, it did that okay. But oh my gosh, I just can't describe enough how much this impacts that aspect of the game of feeling that adventure. And back to that design space, I think there's also, and I haven't thought about this thoroughly, I think there's so much more design space now for those expansions. Like in the past, the expansions were, oh, here's an Egyptian board.
Sure.
It was basically just a different map. This, you could come up with very unique expansions, which effectively, I mean, it could just be a set of tiles like this that you mix in a couple that do all sorts of wild different things. I mean, you could have specific things that you're looking for, things that could add actually maybe even a little narrative to it. I don't know that that's what they plan.
Well, they could. I could imagine a campaign-like version where some of these tiles you flip it over and it's narrative instead of like tells you to go look at a book like Clank Legacy did. But they already have a few things like that. Like you've got like the ghost rooms, which add ghost cubes to the board. You've got those way shrines David mentioned. Yeah. You've got rooms like this one where it was like a bank where it's really difficult to get back out of it once you're in it. It almost feels like you're sliding down, a rock tunnel. And you get those moments just come out organically as you're placing the tiles. Not to mention, a lot of the new cards refer to these tiles by letting you maybe even shift some around, rearrange them. There's some that have you spinning the tile that you're on to kind of change the orientation.
Yeah, you could potentially screw someone up who's they're counting on a path to get back somewhere, to get somewhere they're trying to get, and something could rotate, and now they have no way of getting there. I used a card that let me move, and I had to trash the card, but it let me move from one waypoint to a completely other one, which is huge to move from over to here on the map, because it put me in a much better position to get out of the dungeon.
Oh yeah, and the core gameplay is still kind of the same. I mean, you're still going into the dungeon by playing cards, you're trying to find an artifact, and then you're trying to get out, and you're trying to be the first one out. It's just a lot harder to do that when you don't know the path you're taking to get back. And there's a lot more one-way paths in this game too. So a lot of the paths you took to get down into them, you can't just turn around and go back. You have to explore new tiles and find new ways to go around and get back to where you're going.
Now, there's one other thing I noticed about this, and you've had more experience playing all the different Clanks than I have, is the way they've increased the amount of use of lockpicks new in this, or has that been in another Clank?
So in the old Clanks, you had a key, and once you had a key, you could just open up any locks. You could just go through and unlock every door.
But those were just routes, effectively.
They were just effectively routes, that's right. But now, instead of just being able to buy a key, they've given you lockpicks, which are actually a resource that you have to manage. Not only do they open up the paths, like in regular Clank, you could also find locked treasure chests. So you could open treasure chests to get secrets.
Like cages, or
you
like
could open
jail
cells to rescue prisoners, which give you bonuses. You can unlock secret libraries to earn tomes, which are worth points at the end of the game. So not only did they just give you this new resource to unlock it, they found other ways to have you use those. So you have to decide, if I'm in a room, do I want to spend my last lockpick to rescue these prisoners? Because when you flip over the next tile, it might have a lock, and you might need that lockpick to progress to where you're planning on going. And so you're making those tough decisions, which were already, I think, tough decisions in Clank, like that push your luck element of, can I get in and survive to come back out? But now you're pushing your luck with how many, like, I can go the way I know, or I can risk it and maybe get a teleportation node that lets me teleport, or maybe I could get a trap and like, I'm one way and I'm stuck down here.
Yeah, so we always ask each other this in a Just Played, who's it for, who's it not for? I'm going to start with who's it for. You can think who it's not for, because that's the tall order on this one, I think. Who it's for, first of all, if you like Clank, you should try this. I'll take that a step further and say, if you liked Clank and got tired of it, this is absolutely worth trying, because that's kind of the category I put myself in. Like, Clank was a great game. In fact, it has a place in board gaming, I think, of significance. But over the years, except for things like the legacy version and stuff like that, the base level Clank probably was not something that found its way to the table a lot. This, I think, changes that. You're going to bring this to the table. That feeling of excitement and discovery is very meaningful to me. And it makes the experience of playing a game like this so much more interesting. And like I said, I'm that much more excited about the concept of what they do with it and expansions that they bring out. So who is it not for,
Well, I will say, for one thing, it is a little bit more complicated than basic Clank. Because you don't just have that board.
A little bit.
It's when you're bringing in new players, or Clank is a great gateway game. I think you can kind of use Clank to teach things like deck building and moving around a board and things like that. This is maybe not so much, just because you can't look at a board and you can't pre-plan. I think some people really relied on that, like especially if this is your first game of Clank. I would still maybe use basic Clank to teach it before coming into Catacombs, just to say, okay, in this game, you can get yourself into some really tight spots by like when you draw a tile. It might just be a bad tile, and it might be really difficult for you to get out of that tile. In the basic game, they've kind of prearranged it so the board is pretty easy to manage, and you can loop around the sides to get back to where you want to go. And there's just a lot of ways to get where you're going, which is good. I mean, for me, it's positive that they changed all those things. This is a harder board. It's more of a puzzle. There's more of that exploration mode. But it might be too much for new gamers to have to understand, like, oh, well, I can rearrange this tile one of 4 ways. One of the ways is going to help me, and one of the ways is going to hurt me. So I think you need to be ready to help a little bit more when it comes to giving advice like, okay, but here, let me point out to you, if you just arrange this a little bit of a different way, you can now make a path that there wasn't a path before, right? And so I do think it's a little bit of a step up in complexity from basic Clank.
Yeah, so maybe I wasn't going to agree with you, but I will agree with you. I think if you're brand new to Clank, and I'll take it a step further and give another reason why. Maybe try base level Clank, if for no other reason, if you're bringing new players to the Clank universe, so that then you can play this, so that those players too can experience the evolution. Right. Because that is one of the things I'm most excited about is the difference. Like the difference of what they've done with this, I think is exactly what they needed to do to Clank. And I think new players should experience the old one first.
That being said, if you don't like Clank, if you didn't like the first Clank, I'm not sure that this reinvigorates the formula enough. I mean, it is still, you're buying the cards, you're using the move symbols, the attack symbols to move around and fight monsters, and you're still doing a lot of the same things you did in regular Clank. I would suggest give this one a try, because if you're just tired of Clank or you're tired of the people that use the same strategies every time you play, this does eliminate a lot of those issues, and so you might find a lot of enjoyment in a game that you kind of wrote off earlier, because to me, this does reinvigorate it. Like you said, this gets it back to the table in a new way. And it's another one of those things that just seems so obvious in retrospect. Like, why was this never done before?
Well, I'm sure it was a challenge to develop it this way and to come up with a system that worked, but without, the number of times in development where a tile was like, oh, well, this one's not going to work. So we need to readdress how we lay out these routes.
It is kind of crazy the way that the tiles work all together. And they even kind of address it by the artifacts aren't pre-placed. The artifacts come out as you explore. And some of them, like these ones that have the plus symbol, will tell you to find a deeper artifact because they're harder to get to. Like this one is locked or it's behind.
Yeah, so they don't necessarily come out in the same order. It's not just low to high necessarily. You skip some and then a low one might come out later. So anyway, those are our feelings on Clank Catacombs. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. You can tell by our enthusiasm, we're definitely willing to get down there and answer everything.
Yeah.
But until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.